Hallucinatory media, AI, approximation, and the psychopharmacology of representation. Digital simulation long predates contemporary AI systems. For decades, media environments have relied on increasingly polished techniques of representation: CGI, 3D modeling, motion capture, compositing, stock footage, algorithmic editing, and modular sound design. These techniques aim toward verisimilitude, the credible reproduction or stylization of reality. Even when fantastical, they preserved continuity, perspective, and narrative coherence. Their distortions were intentional, engineered, and expensive. AI-mediated simulation introduces a different regime. Rather than constructing images, narratives, or sounds through explicit modeling, it operates through statistical approximation across vast datasets. The result is not representation in the classical sense, but probabilistic hallucination, outputs that resemble familiar forms while subtly violating their internal logic. Faces drift, meanings smear, causality loosens, and coherence becomes local rather than global. This hallucinatory quality places AI-generated media somewhere between traditional simulation and perceptual distortion, closer in effect to psychedelic experience than to cinematic illusion. Not because AI creates visions, but because it decouples perception from stable reference. The viewer recognizes patterns without being able to anchor them fully in intention, authorship, or reality. In this respect, AI does not invent hallucination. It accelerates and cheapens a process already underway. Video essays assembled from stock footage, generic music, templated rhetoric, and recycled tropes were already operating as soft hallucinations, experiences of meaning constructed from familiar signals with minimal grounding. AI simply collapses the remaining distance between production and distortion. What once required teams, budgets, and logistics now emerges instantly, erratically, and at scale. Your own practice, long predating AI, of low-budget pastiche, collage, and format bending can be understood as an early engagement with this condition. By exploiting glitches, mismatches, irrelevancies, and incongruities, you treated distortion not as a flaw, but as a medium. Where mainstream production sought polish, you worked with approximation. Where coherence was expected, you allowed drift. AI appears less as a rupture than as a technological validation of a sensibility that was previously marginalized. The analogy to psychopharmacology is not metaphorical excess. Different media forms condition perception in ways comparable to substances. Classical narrative media function like depressants or stabilizers, smoothing experience, enforcing continuity, reassuring causality. Rapid-fire social media resembles stimulants. Fragmented attention, heightened reactivity, compulsive engagement. AI-generated media approximates psychedelic or dissociative effects, pattern recognition without grounding, familiarity without origin, meaning without agency. At scale, such perceptual conditioning has sociological consequences. Hallucinatory media environments blur distinctions between fiction, analysis, irony, and assertion. They do not persuade through argument, but through ambient plausibility. This is not mass delusion in the sense of shared belief in a false proposition, but something more diffuse, a normalization of perceptual instability. The question, is this real, becomes less relevant than, does this resemble something I recognize? Mental health discourse often treats hallucination and delusion as individual pathologies. Yet media systems increasingly reproduce analogous conditions collectively, without clinical thresholds. The result is a culture that oscillates between credulity and cynicism, immersion and detachment, belief and parody, often simultaneously. People are neither fully convinced nor fully skeptical. They are perceptually habituated. From this angle, AI does not corrupt an otherwise authentic media ecology. It exposes what was already there, a long-standing reliance on approximation, affect, and repetition, now rendered explicit and unstable. The anxiety provoked by AI, its uncanny quality, is less about deception than about recognition. The distortions were always present. The tool simply makes them harder to ignore. What remains unresolved is not whether these hallucinations are true or false, but how subjects are meant to inhabit an environment where representation no longer guarantees meaning, and where distortion is no longer exceptional, but infrastructural.